This is Code.org, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to alphabetize a list. Now, I'll be honest, this is a bit tricky, but it's really impressive. Let's go ahead. I'm going to hit run to show you what I'll do. So right here are nicknames of every US state. Boom. All alphabetized. And they do not start in alphabetical order. Also, let's do something here. Let's do capitals. Reset, run, boom. All alphabetized. To do this, we're going to have to use nested loops. We're going to use nested if statements. And it's a bit complicated, but you can be really proud of yourself. It's something really impressive to show off when you got it all working. Traditionally in JavaScript, there are methods like the sort method that would be used for this, but let's do this using what we have learned thus far. Let's dive in. This is code.org. I'm going to take a look at alphabetizing a list today. Now, keep in mind, this is not exactly for the faint of heart. It's totally doable, but it takes a bit of work on our part. So let's talk about that work that it takes. I've already selected my data set, and it's right here. I'm doing US states. I hit import, and so that's what I'll be working with. And I have a rudimentary design here, output, a button to make it go, things of this nature. And here's my var name list is what I called it, because I'm going to get the states names, and that will all go into this array or this list. I now have a blank list called var abc, or an empty one, and to make sure you have an empty list, you need to set it equal to these brackets. It's an empty array. And then I go ahead and say, okay, well, this first index, 0, and remember, lists always start at index 0, is going to be equal to, so my empty list is going to have the first thing identical to the first thing in the name list. Now let me do a bit of indexing to show you and make sure we got that down. So I'm going to throw a for loop right here. Var I is equal to 0. I is less than 4, I++. So I is going to start at 0. I cannot be larger than 4, and we're going to add 1 to I each time. That's I++. And you really need to have a good bearing on this. You should check out some of my other videos about lists if you don't, but I'm just going to do a quick tutorial here, and I'll just say I plus and do a space plus name list I. And what this will do is I have an extra quote. What this should do is print out the I value, which will start at 0, and then the state name. It's giving me some problems. Let me see. Sometimes it will do this. There we go. So I just need to go back to Box and refresh. Which sometimes it will do that. So let's try that again. There we are. And here's the first 4. I want to point out that when doing indexes, it starts at 0. So your array, your list starts at index 0. Alabama is at 0. Alaska is at 1. Arizona is at 2. Arkansas is at 3. Oh, these are already alphabetized. Let's take a look. Nickname. I'm out alphabetized their nicknames then. Let's see. Ooh, or I could do their capitals. I'm going to alphabetize their capitals. That would be a better idea, since their names are already alphabetized. So, there we are. Okay, now let's try this. Great. And so it's not alphabetized, of course, right now, but I just want you to understand it starts at 0. It's going to stop at 4. Now, it's stopping at 4 means that it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, and once it hits 4, it's done. We start at 0. 0 is less than 4. We go through. 0 index is Montgomery for Alabama. Hits the bottom, goes back to the top. Oh yeah, I++. So we add 1 to I. And I was 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 is less than 4. Goes down here. Prints 1. Prints Juneau, which is the capital of Alaska. Hits the bottom, back to the top. I is now 3. Back to the top, which was Little Rock. I is now 4, and it is done. So if you want to go through the whole thing, which you do, you want to use the length method, or the length property here. So, and it's also in variables list.length. This will grab the entire length of our list. What's great about length is it counts it like normal. It doesn't start counting at 0, right? So if this was the whole list, length would say 4, and that is perfect because we want it to be 4 because our indexes are 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? And then once I becomes 4, it's over because there's no index 4, but it does have 4 items. Okay, now we'll do all 50. And it says 49 here, keep in mind, because it starts at 0. So there's 50 things, but it says 49 with that last index. Okay, now that we know about looping through our list, we're gonna need to keep track of a few things. We want a variable to represent what index we are at in this list here, in the list we're alphabetizing. So I'm gonna just do var, no, let me set it equals. Okay, so right under this, I'll go ahead and say var I ABC, just so I know what this is, and it's just going to equal 0. And IABC, what I'm trying to say there is the index of ABC. So on event, start button, this code executes. We're off to a good start. What we're going to need to do now is, let me reset this, is we want to check each option in our list. I'm just going to pull that off the screen. To do that, we want to make sure that we reset. Each time we loop through our list, we are looking and comparing this variable, wherever we're at in the name list. We want to check where we are compared to ABC. So if it is alphabetically, if it is a C or a D, we want to keep going into the list until we find that spot, and then we put that value into the ABC list, right? So we're going to loop through the name list, but each item we are at in the name list, we then, we go to the next item, we then need to look through ABC to figure out wherever that belongs. Because if Alabama's capital was zebra, or if Missouri's capital was zebra, well, we'd hit the name list, whatever, 19, which happened to be zebra, and then we would look at ABC, but the first thing would be, a capital that starts with an A, and then a B, and then a C. So we would have to loop through this list, hit the capital. Once we get the capital, we loop through ABC until we find a spot that we can add that capital in. So it would be in the correct order. So we need a loop within a loop. And that's why this is somewhat tricky. I'm going to go ahead and drop this in. I want to make sure each time I loop in my for loop, each time I go up by 1, since I'm using this index to keep track of where I am in the original list, each time I go up by 1, I'm going to want to reset my index for ABC. Because if I go to the next state, I want to now look back through the entire list, starting at 0, because the next state's capital could start with an A, and the last one started with a Z. So when I go to that next state capital, I want to start looking at my ABC list at index 0 to see if that capital belongs at the front of the list. Under this now, I'm going to need another loop. I'm going to use a while loop. I'm doing this for a few reasons. Using a for loop can get confusing. We're also going to need a way to break out of our loop. Now, I'm doing this, keep in mind, I'm doing this with all the options and things we have learned on code.org thus far. JavaScript, the language you are learning, does have a sort method that largely does this for us. We haven't gotten there yet, and it's really good to understand how these things operate. There's also a break option, and we're not going to use that. We're going to use our index control. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry. We're going to keep going. All right. So now, while I want to loop through my ABC list. So if I have 10 values in there, I want to loop through those 10 cities or those 10 state capitals and see alphabetically where the next one belongs. To do that, I'm going to say as long as IABC, which is my index, IABC is less than ABC.length. So far, this is similar to the for loop, but it's going to be different. Okay. Now, I have something that's going to loop forever if I don't make sure to do a add to IABC each time. You can actually use I++. I could do IABC++. And again, plus plus means IABC equals IABC plus 1. You're just counting up. However, for clarity's sake, we have been using the more direct approach, IABC, the non-shorthand IABC plus 1. So I just need to make sure that inside of my loop, I'm going to be adding to IABC each time. Otherwise, it's an infinite loop and it will never stop. Okay, So now that we have that, let's start checking for stuff. Let's check if we want to add an item to our list. How do you check stuff in code? Well, you need conditional statements. You need if statements. If B is less than A, well, then we want to put the state capital right there. All right, so let's head over to controls, and I'm going to grab an if. Drop it right here. So something that's kind of cool about this actually is that JavaScript allows you to directly compare strings, right? So I can compare words and know if one is greater than the other. And what I mean by that is, here, I'm just gonna write true for now, so it leaves me alone because I think it'll yell at me. Oh, let's put something in here actually, and then I'll show you what I mean. I'm gonna compare the string in the ABC array, or so the string in the ABC list. So starting out, for instance, I would just have this first name, this first capital, which is Montgomery. So starting out, the only capital in here is Montgomery. So I hit this and I say, okay, we'll grab that first index. Let's actually start at 1 because I already know the first state's capital has been added to the list right here. So I don't need to start the index at 0. I can start at 1. So I'm going to grab that second state capital. We have Montgomery, which is Juneau. And then I'm going to say, okay, set IABC equal to 0. While IBAC is less than the length, which it currently would be, I want to compare whatever word in ABC. So ABC and the index is going to be IABC. So I want to compare that index starting at 0 with the word we're currently on in the name list. I don't want an equals though. You want to know which one is greater. So I'm going to check if ABC, index IABC is less than name list I. Back to box. Now, why am I checking for this? Well, because if the IABC is less than name list I, that means this is an A or a B. It's a smaller letter because JavaScript uses what's called Unicode values. And it automatically can evaluate strings. It can tell you, in sense, which string is further along in the alphabet. And let me show you just directly here. I'm going to do a few console logs to make the point. Console log. So I'm going to drop some of these here and here. And so I'm going to say, for instance, AAA is greater than BBB. Oh, I need it in quotes. It's greater than BBBB. And so this is just going to print out a true or false. Now I'm going to say bad is less, no, is greater than yo. All right, click off and let me hit run on this. False and false. So is A greater than B? No, because in Unicode, I don't know A is a Unicode value. Actually, I can show you what I mean. Here's the Unicode chart. And so here's letter A. Its value is 65. F or G is 71. Notice they all have values. Notice also the lowercase letters have completely different values. So if you're mixing capital and lowercase letters, that could be an issue. Anyways, all right, so this says false because A is less than B. This says false because B is not greater than Y, right? But now let's say this is Z, 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 Z. And this would be true, although you definitely want to don't mix capital and lowercase. So that being said, let me go ahead and continue here. Now that we're evaluating if IABC is less than name list I, so we're saying, okay, if this value is greater, then we need to take a look at possibly adding it behind the current value, right? Since we know this would be less than, it's going to be farther in the list, this needs to be further back. Let's actually do that immediately. So there's going to be another if in here, but I want to show you. Insert item. And what am I going to insert? Well, I have my ABC, and then where do I want to put this item? It would be my current index, IABC plus 1, because we want to make sure it's behind whatever this value is. Since we know this value has a lower, since we know this letter has a lower value than this string. This string has lower value, yikes. All right, and now let's go ahead and do name list I, because that's what we're going to want to add. Whatever index we're currently at, we want to throw on this. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and test this out by putting a watcher on our current list, reset, run, start. Now it's not going to have everything because the only stuff it's going to allow to go on the list is if its value is less than m, right? So everything after m, it looks like it's doing all right with. But if it is not less than m, we're going to have a problem. So we're not getting any of the stuff that would go in front of the letter m. So we need to fix this. To do that, to make sure we get values that go in front of m, also to make sure they're in some order, right? Again, watch. They're not in any real, oh, I clicked it too many times. They're not in any real order here. So we have Montgomery, Olympia, Richmond. They're not in any real order. So we have a few things to fix. Okay, if it is greater, if ABC, the word we're at in ABC, is less than name list word, what we want to do next is we need to check that it is also, so if name list is greater than the current index, we don't want to add it unless, right? So is A less than, we'll say this is currently B, right? Well, yes, A is less than B, but we don't want to add it unless the next letter is, or the next string starts with a C maybe. What if we have uh, some word with A? We're going to make up some capitals. What if we have Atlanta here, and this is the well-known capital of, I'm going to make up a city, Bad City. So Atlanta and Bad City. Well, obviously, Bad City would go after Atlanta. However, if the word on the other side of Atlanta is currently as car, AZ something, right? We wouldn't want to put this name list in the middle of those. We would want to check the thing that's behind this before deciding if it belongs at that position. And to check stuff, we need another if. All right, so now we know that this value is less than this. That's a good start. However, we're not going to do a thing unless we also know that this value is greater than the next item in the list, because then we know it belongs between them. The other part of this, though, just to make it more confusing, we need to check if we're at the end of the list. So I'm going to use an OR for this. First, we're going to check if we're at the end of the list. Because if this value, if this word, say it was Bad City and this is Atlanta, if this is Bad City and this is Atlanta, well, yeah, Bad City belongs after the word Atlanta. And if the list, if that's the end of the list, if all we had in our list was Atlanta, we don't want to look for something that's not there, right? I don't want to check for the word behind Atlanta because it doesn't exist. I just want to add this. So to make sure we're not at the end of the list, I'm going to say IABC equals ABC dot length, the current length of ABC, minus 1, because remember, length gives you a full count, and index is the maximum index is 1 less than length. So if we're at the end, this is going to be true, and let's go ahead and add this item. Or we don't have to be at the end. We could also say if ABC ABC plus 1, so one item passed where we are currently at, if that one item passed where we are currently at is greater than the name list I, the same value that we are currently at, if this is greater, then we know it's less than the value we're at and greater than the next value, IABC plus 1. So we know it belongs smack dab in the middle. And that means we can go ahead and insert it. And so we're going to use insert. Oh, I can drag this up. I already have it. Cha. and then we want to insert it. Perfect. Now, we also don't need to keep checking, right? While we don't want to keep checking, we've added this to the list. We don't want to check again and again. We need to be done. We need to get out of this loop because otherwise we might keep adding it at weird spots. To make sure we get out of this, usually you would use a break statement, but again, let's stick with what we really know so far. So what I will do is if this occurs here, I'm going to go ahead and say IABC equals length, right? So right here, IABC is going to be equal to ABC dot length. And the reason I'm doing this is because now I'll be done with this loop. I just said, okay, make this equal to length. Well, if it's equal to length, length is not less than length, and we're done with the loop, which is what we want. That's good, because we found a location that it belongs. I am doing it inside the second if here, right, the nested if, because if I did it down here, it would break us out of the loop. IABC is equal to length. It would break us out even if we didn't add it. Because if our word has less of a value, if Bad City has less of a value than Atlanta, but the next word in the list was AAZZZZ, well, then we didn't actually get to add our word yet because we need to check that next value, right? We need to keep going. Even though this is less than, there's still words that we need to pass. So we only want to break out of the loop if we actually add it, which is right here with insert. Now, again, this is only going to get us part of the way here, right? But at least now you can see that they're in order. We don't add all of them, but what we do add is going to be alphabetical. All right, now what do we need? Well, what if we're trying to add a capital that is less than? So our first one's Montgomery. What about a capital that starts with A? Okay, for let's say Atlanta again, which I don't even think, I should check. I'm pretty sure that's not the capital of. Oh, we'll use Augusta, sure. So let's say we're going to look at Augusta. Well, Augusta is never going to get added because our first word starts with an M. So we also need to see if the name we are looking at in name list, if it has a value lower than the current node of the list, lower than the first part of the list, well, we need to shove that in front of it, right? We then would need to put that at the front end of our list to make sure the alphabetizing works. So I'm going to click this little plus here on the outer if because I need an else if. Oh, that's an else. I won't need that for this actually. So I'm going to hit plus again. And I'm going to get rid of my else. So what I was saying is we want to check now if the current value is less than the head of the list. So actually, let's focus on if they're equal to. Because if it's less than, we don't need it in a while loop. Why would I check repeatedly if it's less than ABC0? Let's add an equal to, and then we'll get to if the word at name list I is less than, or goes in front of, whoops, that was an accident, or goes in front of the current area. I'm going to zoom out a bit so I can actually see what I'm doing here. All right, so if and it's unlikely that this would occur, but just in case, if IABC, nope, if ABC IABC is equal to name list I, right? So if it's the exact same word, we're just going to go ahead and append it or smack it on where we are at. So we'll use insert again because you don't want to use append because we're not exactly sure where we are. Insert item right here. And then I would just say, like we did before, what list, ABC, then where do I want it? ABC. So that's fine. I can put it at the exact spot we're at because they're equal. So we might shove the current index over by doing an insert, but that's fine because they're equal to each other. And then we would want to go ahead and add name list I. Okay. That's in case they're equal. Now, what if it is a word that has less than the value of the head of the list? We need to put it at the front. Okay, to do that, we're headed back to control again, and we're using an if else. And this if else, first, I'm going to tell you, you want this in the wall, in the else, the whole while loop. Look at how many layers that is. And in the if, you want to check now if we're going to use a less than sign. So if our if ABC 0, so if the first item in our new list that we're making by alphabetizing and filtering, or by alphabetizing, if the first item, index 0, is greater than, I guess I can flip these, if it is greater than, if it is greater than the name list I we are at, the index we are currently at, right? So if this value is greater than this, well then this must be like, the capital of zebra, and this could be the capital Augustus. So we need this to go to the front of the list. So if this is greater than it, we need this at the front. To do that, we're going to do another insert. Boom. Okay, and then we're going to do what? ABC index of 0, because it's going to be the very front of the list, and name list I. Okay, and if we know that if we already inserted it at the very beginning, we don't need to worry about looping through and looking for its spot. It belonged at the beginning, so this isn't an else because this was true. We already put it on the list. We're going to skip all that and keep going. If they are equal to one another, I forgot one thing here. You want to do this again, because if they're equal to one another, you want to break out of the while loop. All right, let's see what we have to debug, because I'm sure there's something. This is looking pretty good. Okay, so let me mess around with outputting it to a screen. So while I'm doing this, there's a lot of ways we can get it on the screen. I could loop it, or I could do the whole list. If I wanted to do the whole list, I would dive into a for loop again. I could do it as I'm running this, but that could get complicated. So I might even do, at the bottom of this, really I would do a function, and I would say, reset, update screen, right? And then in this, and this is just if you need it to go onto the screen. For I is, yep, we can use I again, 0. And then what am I going to do? Well, I have access to this still. So I will say abc dot length. We need it less than the whole list. And then I++. Now I would have a variable, just to make my life easier, called all items maybe. And I'm going to start with it equal to an empty string. Oops, I need that up here. So empty string right there. Now what I'll do is I'm going to loop through everything. So all items is equal to whatever all items used to be equal to plus, right? So plus, I want a line break in between these. So in quotes, I'm going to do a /n, and then I'm going to say plus ABC I. And now I can loop through and make this new string. Then, when I'm all done, I'm going to push it out here. So, set text. I named that output area. And then I don't want it to be text. I'm going to want it to be all items. Now I need to call this, right? Because I've never called it. So I'm going to call it right there just to show you it's a separate function. You have to ask functions to run. So I've made it, but I haven't asked it to run. So I'll output all of my info right here. And there we go. Let's just double check and let me see what else we have here in our data. Any strings that aren't websites? Oh, what's this? Oh, let's alphabetize the nickname just to make sure it's actually working. And it is looking good. Keep in mind, if you have one lowercase word, right? So just as an example, I'm gonna do a quick example. If my first word was a, you know, that famous state a, it's gonna cause an issue because it is lowercase. So it will be all the way down here. Okay, it will be all the way at the bottom if it is lowercase. You could, and if you hit that issue, one way to solve it, if you want to ignore the case of a word, is to use two upper, two lower. And what I'm saying there is in variables, I can go uppercase, and when I'm comparing each of these, right, all the way, every time I say, for instance, ABC0, ABC, IABC, name list, all the way through, I could do two uppercase around those or two lowercase, and then I could ignore the casing. But when I insert it, I would still probably do it this way without changing the casing. So that way, the alphabetizing would ignore the casing, but the list would still have the casing that it originally looked at. But that being said, this is tricky, so good luck with it. But it's really satisfying once you got it down. Have fun. Make something awesome.